They thought they were working in the dark. They believed their whispers would never be heard, their intentions never exposed, their schemes forever hidden beneath the surface of polite smiles and quiet conversations. They imagined you were alone, unprotected, unaware. They studied your weaknesses, counted your fears, traced your steps, assuming you would never notice the slow tightening of the net they wove around you. They made you, and for a moment, perhaps you didn't. For a moment you felt the pressure closing in, the confusion rising, the weight of something you couldn't name pressing against your chest. But what they forgot, what they could never calculate, was the God who watches behind every unseen curtain. There is a strange silence before deliverance, a stillness that makes you think you have been abandoned. In that silence, you questioned yourself. You wondered if you misread people, if you were too trusting, too open-hearted, too willing to see the good in those who held envy in their bones. You replayed every interaction, trying to find the moment the knife was placed at your back, while you were busy offering your hands. But even then, even in your confusion, there was a presence around you, quiet, almost imperceptible, shifting things, blocking paths, delaying plans, creating inconveniences that made no sense until later. The truth is this: while they plotted, God rearranged. While they crafted traps, He loosened the ropes. While they whispered lies, He exposed their tongues. While they thought they were being clever, God was already dismantling the foundation of their plan, not loudly, not with thunder, but with quiet precision. Not to humiliate them, although humiliation often came as a natural consequence, but to protect you from what you could not yet see. You must understand something deeply. Evil is never as subtle as it thinks it is. Darkness believes it can hide because it cannot comprehend the eyes that see all. Those who plan destruction from the shadows forget that shadows exist only because there is light behind them. They forget that no scheme, no matter how well crafted, can stand when God chooses to blow upon it like dust. They forget that the very universe listens to His command, and that the smallest shift in circumstance, a delayed message, a sudden intuition, a closed door, can collapse everything they built. You didn't escape because you were clever. You didn't survive because you fought harder than them. You didn't walk away because you figured them out. You survived because you were carried. You were shielded in ways you'll never fully understand. Shielded from traps you didn't know existed, from conversations you were never meant to hear, from harm that was inches away from reaching you. There were moments when you felt something urging you to step back, moments when your heart tightened for no apparent reason, moments when you chose a different path without knowing why. That wasn't fear. That wasn't overthinking. That was divine intervention. God nudging you gently away from a blow meant to break you. You thought you were hesitating. In reality, you were being guided. And while they waited for you to fall, while they imagined the satisfaction of watching you collapse, God tore their plans apart piece by piece. He let them think they were winning right before He overturned everything. He allowed their arrogance to rise just high enough so that when their plans crumbled, the fall would awaken them, not to punish them through your eyes, but to remind them that power never belonged to them. They tried to move you like a pawn, forgetting that you are not theirs to move. You are held, you are guarded, you are watched by a presence that cannot be threatened, tricked, or manipulated. What they meant for harm, God reversed, without you even lifting a hand. And now, if you look back with honest eyes, you will see His fingerprints everywhere, in the delays, in the redirections, in the people who walked away, in the secrets that surfaced, in the sudden clarity that hit you like light through a window, in the strength that rose inside you when you thought you had nothing left. Their insidious plan did not fail by accident. It failed because it was built against someone God refused to abandon. They worked in the shadows, but God was already watching every hidden move they made. And this is where the story truly begins, not with their plotting, not with their intentions, but with the quiet, unshakable truth that nothing crafted in darkness remains invisible to the one who formed light itself. You must imagine this not as a dramatic clash of powers, but as a calm, steady awareness, like the way the sun does not fight the night. It simply rises, and the night dissolves. In the same way, their schemes only seemed powerful because you could not yet see the sun that was coming. They believed their whispers would never reach your ears. They believed their intentions were safe beneath the surface of polite conversations and false kindness. They moved with the confidence of people who think the world is asleep, who think their thoughts leave no footprints. Yet all the while, behind their every step, every lie, every calculation, there was an all-seeing presence, not angry, not rushed, not frightened, simply watching with the serene certainty of a truth that cannot be deceived. To them, the shadows felt like a shelter. They trusted the darkness to hide them. They imagined that as long as they smiled in your face, you would never notice the tension in their voices, the envy in their eyes, the subtle shifts in their behavior. They underestimated you, yes, but more dangerously, they underestimated the one who walks before you. And that mistake was their undoing before they even began. You were never alone in this. While they strategized, while they waited for the perfect moment to strike, God was already studying the shape of their plan. Every twist, every turn, every trap. Not with surprise, because nothing surprises him. Not with fear, because nothing threatens him. Not with outrage, because he does not need to shout to stop what he does not permit. He simply saw, he simply knew, and that knowing alone was enough to unravel everything they thought they had secured. Imagine them hunched over their intentions, confident that cleverness would blind fate. They thought secrecy was strength. They thought silence meant victory. They didn't understand that God watches without blinking. He watches not the way humans watch, distracted, reactive, emotional, but with perfect clarity. He sees motives before they become actions. He sees the seed before it becomes the tree. He sees the ending while others are still writing the beginning. And here is what makes this divine watching so powerful. God does not have to intervene loudly. He does not need thunder to expose deceit. Sometimes all he needs to do is shift one detail, one moment, one thread, and the entire tapestry of their plan collapses. They thought their steps were hidden, but every step they took under his gaze. Every whisper they exchanged traveled through air he created. Every intention they formed arose inside a mind he allowed to function. How could they ever believe he would be unaware? When someone plots against you, they think of you as small. They think of you as someone who can be cornered, manipulated, overtaken. They forget that there is a covering over your life that cannot be pierced by gossip, betrayal, or strategy. They forget that your story is not written by those who dislike you. They forget that your protection does not come from your awareness, but from his. They forget that God does not guard you by reacting. He guards you by already having seen the danger before it began to form. There were moments when you felt things shifting but didn't understand why. Moments when people acted strangely. Moments when the air felt heavy, when something inside you whispered that things weren't as they seemed. That was not paranoia. That was not overthinking. That was your spirit responding to what God had already seen. Because when God watches, He does not just observe. He warns, he restrains, he redirects. You thought you were just tired, just cautious, just sensing the atmosphere, but truly you were feeling the echo of his protection. You will never know every detail of what they planned. You will never fully see the depth of their intentions. And that is mercy. Because God sees what you cannot handle. He watches what you are not equipped to confront. He dismantles what would have crushed you before you even know it exists. There are traps you are never aware of, conversations you were never meant to hear, decisions you unknowingly avoided that save you more than you can imagine. And through it all, the truth stands unshaken. The shadows they trusted were never dark enough to hide them from God. Their secrecy was never strong enough to outmaneuver his vision. Their confidence was built on ignorance. They thought they moved unseen. But God had his eyes on every step, every thought, every hidden intention. Their plan began in darkness, but God saw it in full daylight, and because he saw it, he stopped it, not after it harmed you, before it ever reached you. His watching was your salvation long before you realized you needed saving. They thought their plan was tightening around you long before you even understood what was happening. That is the cruel nature of hidden harm. It creeps in quietly, not with thunder but with a whisper. You don't notice the shift at first. Life still moves, conversations still happen, routines continue. Yet beneath the surface, something begins to feel slightly off, slightly unbalanced, like a room where one picture frame is crooked, but you can't quite see which one. You feel the uneasiness before you ever understand the cause, and that is exactly how they wanted it. They spent time studying you, not in admiration, but in calculation. They observed your compassion, your openness, your willingness to forgive, to trust, to give people more chances than they deserved. They interpreted your softness as weakness, your kindness as naivety, your patience as blindness, and so they constructed their plan with precision, tightening it slowly, step by step, so you would not notice the walls closing in until it was too late. You began to sense something changing, a heaviness in the atmosphere, a coldness in the tone of certain people, an uncertainty in conversations that once felt comfortable. You couldn't explain it, couldn't put it into words, but something in your spirit began to whisper, "Pay attention." Yet your heart, honest and hopeful, kept trying to quiet the warning. You told yourself you were imagining things, that you were overthinking, that the discomfort was just stress or exhaustion. You tried to keep believing in the good because believing in good is your nature. But all the while, behind the scenes, their intentions were growing sharper. They spoke sentences designed to confuse you. They asked questions crafted to make you doubt yourself. They planted thoughts in your mind, hoping you would sabotage your own peace without them lifting a finger. They exploited the very tenderness that made you special, hoping to turn it into the reason for your downfall. And slowly, the net tightened. You found yourself questioning your own worth. You felt misunderstood, judged, isolated, even though you didn't know why. Their quiet manipulations worked their way into your thoughts like a poison that doesn't announce its arrival, but weakens you little by little. This is how insidious plans operate, not by attacking your strengths, but by dissolving them. Not by confronting you directly, but by confusing you until you cannot distinguish intuition from insecurity. Yet, even in your confusion, even in your emotional fog, God was present in ways you did not recognize. He allowed you to feel the pressure not to punish you, but to heighten your awareness. He let the discomfort rise because without it, you would have walked further into the trap. That growing heaviness was not a sign of defeat. It was a divine alarm ringing inside your spirit. You were meant to notice the tension, You were meant to feel uneasy. These signals were your first layer of protection. There were moments when you couldn't sleep without knowing why. Moments when a name crossed your mind and something deep inside recoiled. Moments when you heard a sentence that seemed harmless, yet your heart felt pierced. These weren't coincidences. These weren't emotional reactions. They were spiritual warnings, subtle nudges from God telling you, you're getting closer to danger, stay alert. If you look back now, you'll realize how many things suddenly began going wrong. Plans collapsed, meetings were cancelled, messages didn't reach you, people withdrew for reasons you couldn't understand. You thought everything was falling apart, but in reality, everything was being rearranged. The tightening you felt was not simply their trap. It was God tightening his hand around you, pulling you away, even when you didn't know what you were being pulled from. You must understand this truth. The enemy often moves quietly, but God moves with purpose. When the trap was almost closed, when their intentions were almost ready to strike, God interrupted their timing. That interruption felt uncomfortable to you. It felt like losing control, like being pushed off your path, like everything was slipping from your hands. The pressure you felt was not a sign that you were defeated. It was the sign that deliverance was already on its way. You felt the tightening around you, but you did not know that God had already begun breaking the ropes. You felt like the world was closing in, but you did not know that God was creating an exit before the danger reached you. The heaviness, the confusion, the emotional turbulence. They were not signs of your weakness. They were signs of the spiritual battle happening around you. You were being pulled between the darkness that wanted to swallow you and the hand of God that was determined to save you. And in the end, his hand won. They thought their plan was unfolding perfectly, but what they didn't know, what they could not know, was that God was already intervening in quiet, subtle ways that protected you long before you recognized any danger. Divine protection does not always come with lightning or sudden miracles. Sometimes it arrives disguised as inconvenience, a delay, a closed door, an unexpected change of plans. These small interruptions that frustrated you were actually the first signs that heaven had stepped between you and the harm designed for you. You might not have realized it then, but God began interfering with their scheme the moment they decided to harm you, not because you asked, not because you knew what was happening, but because his eyes had never left you. He works in silence, in ways that seem almost invisible until you look back and see the unmistakable pattern. Every interruption was protection. Every disappointment was a diversion. Every no was a shield. There were days when you felt something was holding you back. You tried to push forward with a plan or a relationship or a decision, but nothing worked the way you expected. You blamed yourself, thinking you lacked discipline, motivation, or clarity. But the truth is far more powerful. God was blocking paths you didn't know were dangerous. He saw the hidden intentions forming behind your back. He saw the conversations they had about you. He saw the trap tightening slowly, and, he said, "Not this one, not today, not ever." It is difficult to understand divine protection when you're inside the moment. When your plans collapse, you feel lost. When people suddenly distance themselves, you feel abandoned. When everything slows down without explanation, you feel punished. But God was not punishing you. He was pulling you away from what was meant to destroy you. He was removing you from places where your name was being twisted, where your trust was being exploited, where your kindness was being weaponized against you. There were moments when you felt tired for no reason, moments when your heart felt heavy at the thought of seeing certain people, moments when your intuition whispered, "Don't go, don't answer, wait a little longer." You didn't know why, but your spirit reacted before your mind understood. That was divine intervention in its purest form. God speaking in the language of inner guidance, a language deeper than words. He disrupted their timing. He shifted the atmosphere. He created sudden obstacles in the very moments they hoped to corner you. What they saw as unexpected complications were actually the fingerprints of God. Imagine them waiting for the perfect moment, only to watch that moment slip away again and again with no explanation. Imagine their frustration as everything they set up refused to align. They could not see the invisible hand undoing their work, but that hand was there all along. And while they moved in secrecy, God moved in sovereignty. Their whispers were heard, their intentions were known, their plans were intercepted, not with noise, not with panic, but with divine precision. God has never needed to announce his actions. He protects you in ways that seem ordinary until hindsight reveals they were miraculous. If you reflect honestly, you'll remember situations that didn't feel right, conversations that felt heavy, invitations that you suddenly declined, people you once trusted but could no longer open up to. That wasn't coincidence. That was your spirit, responding to what God already saw behind the curtain. Sometimes protection feels like isolation. Sometimes it feels like confusion. Sometimes it feels like losing people you loved. But all of these were shields. Barriers God built between you and the harm designed to reach you. You didn't choose to escape. You were pulled away. And though it felt painful in the moment, your soul was being rescued from a wound that would have cut much deeper. God intervened in ways you didn't understand at the time. He redirected your steps so subtly that you thought the changes came from your own decisions. He guided your emotions, softened your spirit, tightened the unease in your chest, all so you would not step further into the trap. You may have thought you were just tired or stressed or procrastinating, but now you can see that every pause, every hesitation, every instinct to wait was divine protection, cloaked in ordinary feelings. There were dangers you never saw, there were betrayals you never heard, there were conversations planned about you that never happened because God scattered them before they could gather. There were attacks meant to reach you that were dismantled before they touched your name. And you moved forward each day, unaware that heaven had already fought battles you never knew existed. This is what it means when we say God intervenes quietly. He does not always split seas or send thunder. Sometimes he simply says, no, and the danger dissolves. Sometimes he says, wait, and the plan collapses. Sometimes he whispers, turn, and you avoid a disaster that was seconds away from unfolding. His intervention was not loud, but it was enough to save you. Evil never hides as well as it thinks it does. Darkness believes it can swallow truth simply because it does not understand the nature of light. Those who plotted against you trusted their shadows. They trusted secrecy. They trusted the illusion that their quiet actions, their silent conversations, their rehearsed expressions would conceal the poison they carried. They convinced themselves that as long as they whispered behind closed doors, as long as they chose their words carefully, as long as they moved quietly enough, no one, especially you, would ever know what they were trying to orchestrate. But the flaw in their confidence was simple. Darkness cannot comprehend the presence of a God who sees everything. They assumed their intentions were invisible. They believed their inner thoughts were locked safely behind their ribs. They assumed no one could detect the envy sitting inside their smiles, or the malice hidden behind their politeness. This is the mistake of every deceiver, believing that concealment equals control, believing that silence equals victory. believing that intentions remain harmless as long as they are not spoken aloud. But God does not require words to understand a heart. He does not need confessions to expose motives. He does not wait for actions to reveal intentions. He sees the seed before it breaks the soil. He sees the storm before the clouds form. He sees the betrayal before the betrayer decides to strike. Nothing hidden from you was ever hidden from him. And so while they believed they were building something clever, something undetectable, God was observing the entire structure with a clarity they never imagined. Their plan, even in its earliest form, was fully visible to the one who reads the soul more easily than humans read expressions. The moment the thought entered their heart, it stood exposed. The moment they began imagining ways to bring you down, those very thoughts were illuminated under divine vision. You must understand how powerful this is. They did not lose because they were weak or foolish. They lost because they were trying to construct darkness inside a universe governed by light. They were trying to build a fortress of lies while being watched by the truth himself. Their plan was doomed before it even took shape, because God does not allow wickedness to flourish when it is aimed at someone he protects. At first, nothing seemed unusual to you. They moved casually, they behaved normally. They carried themselves with the confidence of people who thought they were untouchable. But corruption has a scent, and spiritual eyes can sense what physical eyes cannot. Slowly, God began letting small cracks appear. You started noticing inconsistencies in their behavior, words that didn't match their tone, actions that didn't match their intentions, energy that didn't match their smiles. Not enough for you to build a case, but enough for your spirit to become unsettled. This is the first form of exposure, discernment. Before anything is revealed externally, God awakens the awareness inside you. You begin to feel something is wrong even when everything looks normal. You begin to hear something false even when everything sounds fine. You begin to sense dishonor even when their words are polite. This is not paranoia. It is spiritual vision. It is God letting the darkness leak through the cracks so you will not place your trust in the wrong hands. Then, slowly, the exposure intensifies. Their plans stop aligning. Their manipulation stops working. Their confidence begins to crumble. Their lies begin to contradict each other. They start slipping, not because they suddenly became careless, but because God allowed the truth to rise like sunlight under a closed door. Light always finds its way out, even when someone tries to lock it away. What they whispered in secret is suddenly echoed back to them in unexpected ways. The people they used as pawns begin turning unreliable. Conversations they thought were safe become accidentally overheard. Alliances they depended on shift. Paths they tried to open for themselves begin shutting in their faces. Every step begins resisting them. Athletes, he strikes to win the lottery, but there are too many. This is the second form of exposure. Their own plans rebel against them. Darkness does not have the authority to sustain anything. It collapses under its own weight when God removes his hand from it. Eventually, their intentions become clear. Not because you went searching for truth, but because truth came searching for you. Situations revealed what words tried to hide. Circumstances showed what faces tried to disguise. The very people who supported them began to see their real nature. A plan built in secret became a spectacle of failure. This is the final form of exposure. God reveals what was never meant to stay hidden, not to shame you, not to shame them, but to free you, to save you, to remove you from danger before danger reached you. Their arrogance blinded them. They believed no one could see, but God saw, and because he saw their plan never had a chance. You didn't escape because you were clever. You didn't survive because you were strong enough to see what was coming. You didn't walk away because you outsmarted anyone. The truth is far simpler, far more humbling, and far more powerful. You were carried. You were protected in ways you did not see, defended in battles you did not fight, shielded from wounds you did not even know were aimed at you. What they meant to break you never reached you, not because you built walls, but because God stood between you and the danger long before you knew danger existed. There is something profoundly sacred in this truth. You were living your days unaware, going about your responsibilities, speaking kindly to people whose hearts were already turning against you. You were offering trust to those who were handling it carelessly. You were giving love where envy had already begun to root. And yet, despite all of this innocence, you were protected, not because you had the wisdom to identify threats, but because heaven had already marked you as someone who would not be touched by what was being plotted. They thought you were alone. They believed you walked without backup. They assumed your gentle nature meant you were an easy target. They underestimated you, but more importantly, they underestimated the one who walked beside you, because while you were unaware, God was already at work, blocking, deflecting, confusing, and dismantling everything aimed at you. Think about the moments that didn't make sense back then, the situations you escaped without explanation, the decisions you made that you couldn't logically justify, the sudden aversion you felt towards certain people even though nothing visible had changed. That wasn't coincidence. That wasn't intuition alone. That was divine interference. A quiet voice guiding your steps, nudging your heart, stirring your spirit. You thought you were just being careful. You thought you were just tired. You thought you were overreacting. But now, looking back, you can see it clearly. You were being led out of harm's way. There is a difference between surviving by strength and surviving by grace. When someone survives by strength, they know every danger, they fight every battle, they see every threat. But when someone survives by grace, they are preserved from things they never even detect. Their rescue is invisible, their deliverance is silent, and their protection is woven into moments that feel ordinary, but are anything but ordinary. You are here today not because you saw the trap, but because God dismantled it before you stepped into it. You are intact, not because the attack missed you by accident, but because the attack was stopped at the source. The battle never reached you, not because you fought it, but because God fought it on your behalf, and He fought it long before you even knew anything was wrong. There were conversations about you that God disrupted. There were alliances against you that God dissolved. There were opportunities designed to lure you into pain that God closed. There were decisions made behind your back that God reversed. There were lies spoken about you that never spread because God shut the mouths that tried to carry them. You were preserved at a level deeper than awareness. They saw your compassion and assumed you were defenseless. But what they didn't see was the spiritual perimeter around your life, one they had no power to cross. They thought their strategy was clever, but God turned every clever plan into confusion. They tried to pull strings, but God cut the strings they were depending on. They tried to manipulate circumstances, but God rearranged the circumstances before their hands even touched them. They tried to weaponize your past, your love, your vulnerability. But God bent every weapon backward until it never reached you. You were saved quietly, gently, faithfully, not because you deserved the danger, but because you didn't deserve the destruction they intended for you. God saw the parts of their plan you would never survive. He saw the emotional toll you weren't prepared for. He saw the heartbreak that would have changed you in ways you weren't meant to be changed. And so he intervened in ways that felt ordinary to you, but were monumental in the unseen realm. Your survival is not a testament to your intelligence. It is a testament to his commitment. You were carried through places where your feet would have faltered. You were shielded in moments where your heart would have shattered. You were guided through darkness you didn't even know existed. And now, standing here looking back, you can finally see that the only reason you didn't break is because God refused to let you be broken. They intended to harm you, God intended to save you, and God's intention is always stronger. They believed their plan was flawless. They imagined every step had been carefully crafted, every detail accounted for, every outcome manipulated in their favor. They thought they held control over the narrative of your life. But what they didn't understand, what they never even considered, was that their plan, no matter how well constructed, stood on ground they did not own. It was built on territory that belongs to God, and any structure built in defiance of him collapses the moment he breathes upon it. What they built against you fell apart like dust because God blew on it. Not with fury, not with spectacle, but with the effortless authority of the one who governs outcomes. You must understand the quiet power behind this. Their confidence wasn't small, it was towering. They felt certain that their scheme would succeed. They mistook your goodness for vulnerability. They mistook your silence for ignorance. They mistook your empathy for blind trust. In their arrogance, they assumed victory was inevitable. But arrogance always forgets one crucial truth. Plans formed against a protected soul have an expiration date. They were stacking stones, building their tower of manipulation, gathering information, twisting truth, and weaving narratives. They thought each step brought them closer to their triumph. They didn't see that every step was also bringing them closer to divine interruption. God watched their hands move carefully, steadily, and then at the precise moment, the moment when they believed nothing could stop them, he exhaled. A single shift in circumstances, a single unexpected event, a single closed door, a single exposed lie, and suddenly everything they built began to crumble. It didn't collapse slowly. It didn't fall piece by piece. It fell all at once. Have you ever seen something fall apart so quickly that it almost feels supernatural? One moment it stands tall, full of pride, and the next moment it lies in ruins without anyone knowing how it happened. That is what God did to their plan. What they constructed with secrecy, he shattered with light. What they built on deceit, he dismantled with truth. What they designed to trap you, he turned into a snare for themselves. Their conversations were undone, their coordination dissolved, the people they relied on grew suddenly unreliable, doors they expected to open slammed shut, opportunities they thought would advance their scheme evaporated. Their confidence turned into confusion. They began scrambling, trying to salvage the collapsing structure of their intentions. But nothing worked, not because they made mistakes, but because God withdrew the permission that was never theirs to begin with. This is the part many people don't understand. God does not need force to destroy wickedness. He simply removes his hand, and darkness collapses under its own weight. You didn't witness the spiritual mechanics behind this collapse, but now when you look back, you can see the chain reaction clearly. The sudden argument between the people who were supposed to support their plan, the unexpected information that surfaced at the perfect moment, the shift in someone's loyalty, the conflict that broke their unity, the detail they overlooked but God magnified. These were not coincidences, they were divine disruptions. While they built, God weakened. While they schemed, God tangled. While they calculated, God confused. While they advanced, God reversed. And when they finally realized their plan was failing, it was too late to fix anything. They tried to regain control, but the ground beneath their feet was already cracking. They tried to manipulate circumstances, but circumstances were no longer under their influence. They tried to restore alliances, but trust between them had already been poisoned by their own greed. They didn't understand how everything fell apart so quickly. They didn't understand why nothing aligned anymore. They didn't understand why every move seemed to backfire. They didn't understand why the doors they confidently pushed against suddenly turned to stone. But you understand now. You understand that the collapse of their plan was not random. It was divine timing. God let them build just long enough for their intentions to be fully exposed. He let them rise just high enough so their fall would teach them humility. He let them think they were winning so that their loss would remind them of His authority. Their downfall wasn't punishment, it was consequence. Their failure wasn't sabotage, it was justice. And you, standing there untouched, became the living proof that God protects the pure-hearted and frustrates the plans of the deceitful. You became the reminder that no scheme against you can stand when God chooses to intervene. Their plan was dust before it even reached you. Their strategy died the moment God breathed. Their intention turned to ashes because He said no more. When you look back now, with clearer eyes, with a steadier heart, with a spirit that has finally risen above the confusion, you can see something you could not see before. God's fingerprints are everywhere. In every closed door, every sudden shift, every unexpected ending, every uncomfortable moment that made no sense at the time. The protection that felt like inconvenience is now unmistakable. The silence that felt like abandonment is now revealed as strategy. What you thought was chaos was actually choreography. God was saving you long before you even knew you needed saving. Think about the doors that shut abruptly, doors you cried over, doors you tried to pry open with everything in you, opportunities you thought were perfect, relationships you believed were safe. You blamed yourself for those endings, thinking you weren't enough, thinking you had failed somehow. But now that you can see behind the veil, you recognize those closed doors as shields. Had they opened, you would have walked straight into a disaster crafted for your downfall. God didn't close doors to punish you, He closed them to preserve you. Look at the people who drifted out of your life without explanation. The ones who suddenly pulled away, the ones who became distant, uninterested, cold. Back then, their departure hurt deeply. You wondered what went wrong. You wondered if you had done something to push them away. You felt abandoned by those you trusted. But now you can see it clearly. God was removing those who were connected to the plan designed against you. He separated you from their influence, so their poison would never reach your spirit. What felt like loss was actually liberation. Think about the strange heaviness you felt around certain situations, the sudden tension in your chest, the uneasiness you couldn't explain. You dismissed it back then. You told yourself you were being dramatic or emotional, but now that you know what was forming behind your back, you understand those feelings differently. Those were warnings, gentle whispers from heaven saying, "Be still, don't move further, danger is here." Your spirit reacted before your mind understood, because God was already revealing what your eyes could not yet see. Remember the sudden clarity that came without warning, the moment when confusion broke, the moment when the truth hit you like a beam of light through a closed window. You didn't search for those revelations, they came to you. They came because God unveiled what was hidden, not to hurt you, but to free you from the illusions others were using to manipulate your trust, What was concealed in darkness became visible in light, not because you dug it out, but because God placed the truth gently into your hands. Look at the timing of everything. The exact moment you stepped back, the exact moment someone told you something important, the exact moment someone new entered your life, the exact moment circumstances forced you to pause. None of these moments were accidental. They were woven together like threads in a tapestry you didn't know was being created. Each event was timed with divine precision. Interventions that made no sense then, but now form a perfect picture of protection. You can see it clearly now. God saved you through moments you misunderstood. He rescued you through things that looked like setbacks. He defended you in places where you believed you were unprotected. He was present in the cracks, the pauses, the delays. He was guiding your steps when your path felt uncertain. He was breaking traps while you were busy blaming yourself for being confused. Every painful moment was a lesson. Every shift was an act of mercy. Every unanswered prayer was a rerouting towards safety. Every disappointment was God saying, "I saw something you didn't." Every sudden ending was God whispering, "This is not for you." Every uncomfortable redirection was God standing between you and what was meant to destroy you. You survived not because you saw the danger. You survived because God acted in ways you could not see. And now, with hindsight, you can finally breathe and say, "I was protected. I was surrounded. I was chosen to be saved." Not because you were lucky, not because you were perfect, but because God decided the harm designed for you would not touch you. He decided that your story was not going to end in the way others intended. You are standing here today because every hidden battle that threatened you was already defeated before it reached your life. You are standing because God stepped in, quietly but powerfully, and said, "Not this child, not this time." And now that the dust has settled, now that the truth has surfaced and the schemes have collapsed, you stand here not as someone who barely escaped, but as someone who was shielded, guarded, carried. You walk forward with the quiet strength of a soul that has seen both the cruelty of human intentions and the tenderness of divine protection. What was meant to break you became the very thing that revealed how deeply you were watched over. What was planned to destroy you became the path that led you to greater clarity, greater wisdom, and a deeper understanding of your worth. You no longer question what happened. You no longer mourn the doors that closed or the people who walked away. You no longer blame yourself for the confusion you once felt, because now you know the truth. You were never abandoned. God was there in the silence. He was there in the shadows. He was there in every moment you thought you were walking blindly. His protection was wrapped around you, even when you didn't have the words to pray for it. You have survived something you didn't even see forming. You've been delivered from harm you didn't even know was approaching. That is the kind of protection no human can provide, no strategy can undo, no darkness can overpower. And as you step into the next chapter of your life, you carry this truth with you. You are not unguarded, you are not unseen, and you are not at the mercy of anyone's intentions. You are covered by a God who dismantles plots before they reach you, who exposes lies before they trap you, who shuts doors before you walk into danger, and who blows apart the schemes designed to harm you with nothing more than a whisper of his will. Walk forward with your head high, not because you are untouched by betrayal, but because you are untouched by defeat. Not because people never meant you harm, but because their harm never reached you. Not because you are invincible, but because you are protected by the one who truly is. Let this truth become the foundation of your confidence. If God saved you from what you didn't see, imagine what he will do with what you do see. Believe amid precaution. Look after yourself and those you love. Imagine the strength He will give you for battles ahead, the clarity He will give you for relationships ahead, the peace He will give you for seasons ahead. Your story didn't end in the shadows where others tried to bury you. It continues in the light where God chose to place you. And no plan formed in darkness will ever be strong enough to pull you back again.